Hi again, my name is Derek Dunn. This is my presentation on topic 2, social constructs and structures of power. Okay, first let's position this topic within the context of our course. Who is the one proselytizing in Scipio Africanus' narrative? Is it Scipio himself, Scipio's father? Probably neither of these characters. In fact, the one who would be proselytizing the reader would be the author, Cicero. Since Cicero is the original author of the text, he is the one who is proselytizing his audience, us and millions of others. As we know, Cicero was a Roman statesman who wrote a plethora of speeches to influence Roman senators and consuls. For example, Cicero wrote 14 speeches called the Philippics that harshly criticized Mark Antony, his rival. However, the question as to whether someone else is narrating Cicero's perception of Scipio's dream is quite a tricky one. I don't think we can actually be aware of Cicero's influence during the time of his writing the Republic. Here's why. First of all, there's no indicator of his sponsor for this text embedded in the actual text itself. This means we would have to rely on what was happening to historical accounts of Cicero. But the historical account during the time period is sparse. Apparently, the text was written between 54 and 51 BC, which is about 150 years after the time the content of the text actually took place. So we can absolutely rule out Scipio Africanus and his father as a sponsor. The time period 54-51 BC happened sometime after the Catalan conspiracy, but before Caesar's civil war. Since Cicero was in support of Caesar before the civil war, perhaps Caesar could be a possible sponsor. After all, the content of the text depicts it as Scipio's destiny to take over Carthage. So could we speculate that Cicero was possibly referring to Caesar's destiny and possible takeover of Rome? It's a stretch, but not a well-supported one. Thus, it seems to be very unclear who sponsored Cicero to write this text and why. With proselytizing and sponsorship in mind, let's turn to a modern-day social construct which manifests itself as a structure of power. The most immediate one in my life is teaching. Currently, I'm both a teacher and a student. It's a unique position to be able to view both sides of the classroom, and I'm rather fond of both. There is an obvious power play that is involved between the teacher-student dynamic. The university program dictates the overarching content that this teacher needs to teach, but the teacher selects the way that students learn the content based on their biased viewpoint. I say biased because we as teachers and professors must admit that the majority of what we teach and the way we teach it comes from our own understanding of the subject. We've learned a concept in a certain way from our previous mentors, teachers, and professors, and now we're supposed to teach those topics. This experience of teaching has been very interesting for me. I'm the one who determines how to present the material and when to teach it. I'm the one in control of the flow of information that comes into the classroom. I'm the one who establishes how and what students are going to learn in about an hour and a half. It's up to me, the professor. I must admit, sometimes it's nerve-wracking. Am I making mistakes? Then students will just learn from my mistakes. Am I being too harsh? Then the students won't ask questions out of fear. Am I being too dull? Then the students will begin to tune me out throughout the semester. Is my content irrelevant? Then the students won't care about the course. All these little things play into my teaching preparation and during the course of my lecture. On the other side of the classroom, there is the student. Personally, I'm an active learner. I must be engaged with the material for me to actually remember the content. Without engagement, I would just become bored and my mind shuts off, rendering my capacity to learn useless. As a student, I must be motivated to learn, and I must seek the attention of the teacher in order to acquire the learning that I desire. As a result, I'm constantly asking questions and attempting to engage with the material. However, some students are not active learners, but passive ones. They don't need the active engagement at all. Those students are great at learning long lists of information and then repeating those lists on tests. I don't really know how they do it, but their memory serves them in a way that baffles me. With all this said, we must admit that the university program only exists because the student is paying for the education. Without that payment, then there would be no university program. However, the teacher determines whether the student does well in the program or not through continuous assessment. So without the teacher's approval, the student will never progress through the program. There's a two-way power streak happening here. On the one hand, the teacher must teach specific content that the university program has deemed necessary for the education of the student. and they must keep the student engaged through active participation. On the other hand, the student must figure out how to learn from the teacher and learn from the complexities of the program as it applies to their everyday experience and how the program will benefit them in the future. So, who is the ruler of the classroom? It's tough to say. The teacher can say that the students are because they indirectly control the content of the university requirements in the course. But the student could say that the teacher is the ruler of the classroom because the teacher determines the way the content is presented and assesses the student. By being both a teacher and a student simultaneously, I appreciate both perspectives and the power dynamic that is implicit in each. Thanks for watching my presentation.